A Roman traveler stands at the base of the Great Pyramid, tilting his head back, struggling to take in its sheer size. Nearly 500 feet of solid stone towers above him. Its smooth casing still shines in the desert sun. He runs his hand over the massive limestone blocks, covered in strange ancient carvings. He knows this pyramid was a royal tomb, built for a great Egyptian king. But how long ago? A few hundred years? 1,000? The truth? The Romans had no idea. Despite ruling Egypt for centuries, despite sending their best scholars to study its monuments, the most powerful empire in the world was clueless about the true age of the pyramids. And the most shocking part? They weren't even close. Rome's great obsession with Egypt. The Romans were fascinated by Egypt, not just for its wealth, but for its mystique, its history, and its sheer otherworldly presence. They conquered Egypt in 30 BC, after Augustus defeated Cleopatra and Mark Antony at the Battle of Actium. Almost overnight, Egypt was transformed from an independent kingdom into a mere province of the Roman Empire. But unlike other conquered lands, Egypt wasn't just another territory. It was Rome's personal treasure chest. With control over Egypt, the Roman emperors now had access to the greatest agricultural wealth in the Mediterranean, ensuring a stable grain supply for Rome's hungry population. But it wasn't just about food. It was about power, prestige, and legacy. The pharaohs had built a civilization that had lasted thousands of years, and the Romans wanted to claim a piece of that history for themselves. So they did what they always did. They plundered. Egyptian artifacts were stripped from temples and palaces and shipped to Rome. Obelisks, some of which were already thousands of years old, were uprooted from their original locations and transported across the empire to decorate Roman cities. Today, more ancient Egyptian obelisks stand in Rome than in all of Egypt. The pyramids, however, were different. Romans visited them, climbed them, and carved their names into the stone like modern tourists. But when it came to understanding their true origins, their purpose, or their incredible age, they got it completely wrong. How old did the Romans think the pyramids were? So what did the Romans actually believe about the pyramids? Greek and Roman historians attempted to estimate their age, but their guesses were wildly inaccurate, and in hindsight, almost laughable. Herodotus, the famous Greek historian writing in the 5th century BC, believed the Great Pyramid was built around 1200 BC, just a few centuries before Rome itself was founded. That meant, in his mind, the pyramids were old, but not impossibly ancient. He even claimed Egyptian priests had told him exactly how long the pyramids had existed, but without being able to verify their records, he simply accepted their word. A later historian, Diodorus of Sicily, tried to improve upon Herodotus's work. Writing in the 1st century BC, he pushed the date back slightly, estimating that the pyramids were built only a few hundred years before Herodotus's time. But he was still off by more than 1,000 years. Some Roman writers even invented their own legends. One story claimed that a Greek slave girl named Rhodopis built the Pyramid of Menkaure, using her wealth from a successful career as a courtesan. In reality, that pyramid had already stood for over 2,000 years before Rhodopis was even born. The truth is staggering. The Great Pyramid of Giza was completed around 2560 BC, meaning it was older to the Romans than the Romans are to us today. Yet, despite all their power, the Romans never figured this out. They ruled Egypt, they looted its treasures, and they built their own grand monuments. But the true age of the pyramids remained a mystery they never solved. Why the Romans were so wrong. But how could an empire as powerful as Rome be so mistaken about something so monumental? The answer comes down to 3 major reasons. Number 1, the Romans didn't understand Egyptian writing. The walls of temples, obelisks, and tombs were covered in hieroglyphs, but the Romans couldn't read them. By the time they took control of Egypt, knowledge of hieroglyphic writing was already fading. The last few Egyptian priests who could still read them were dying out, and no Roman scholars ever truly learned the script. This meant that the Romans had no access to the detailed historical records that could have told them the pyramids' true age. Number 2, the Romans trusted old, incorrect Greek sources. Instead of trying to uncover Egyptian history themselves, the Romans relied on Greek historians like Herodotus, who had already gotten the dates wrong centuries earlier. Rather than question these old sources, the Romans repeated their mistakes. They preferred Greek myths and legends over the truth. Number 3, The Romans were more interested in looting than learning. The Romans didn't care about understanding Egyptian history. They cared about owning it. Rather than study the pyramids, they stripped them for stone. Rather than preserve ancient records, they plundered temples and shipped artifacts back to Rome. To them, Egypt was a land of exotic wonders to be collected, not a civilization to be understood. What did the Romans actually do at the pyramids? Even though they had no real understanding of their origins, the Romans were absolutely fascinated by the pyramids. We know from ancient sources that Roman tourists flocked to Giza, eager to see the legendary monuments that had already stood for thousands of years. But they weren't content just to admire them from a distance. Many paid local guides to climb the pyramids and bring down small fragments of stone as souvenirs, an early form of destructive tourism. Others took things a step further, carving their names into the limestone blocks, just like modern tourists still do today. And of course, wild speculation ran rampant. With no ability to read the hieroglyphs, the Romans invented their own theories about the pyramids' purpose. Some believed they were built as granaries by the biblical Joseph, an idea that would persist for centuries. Others thought they were monuments to forgotten gods, tombs of ancient kings, or even the work of supernatural beings. Even Roman emperors weren't immune to pyramid fever. The Emperor Septimius Severus, during a visit to Egypt in the late 2nd century AD, became so obsessed with the pyramids that he ordered their entrances to be reopened, hoping to uncover their secrets. But like everyone before him, he found only silence and mystery inside. Despite ruling Egypt for centuries, the Romans never truly unlocked the pyramid's secrets, leaving their true history buried under layers of myth and misunderstanding. The last attempt to understand the pyramids. By the time Rome's empire began to crumble, the last remnants of Egyptian knowledge were slipping away. The priests who once guarded the secrets of hieroglyphs had either vanished or abandoned their traditions, their sacred writing becoming an indecipherable relic of the past. The temples, once centers of learning, were repurposed or left to decay. The last known hieroglyphic inscription, carved at the Temple of Philae in 394 AD, marked the true end of an era. By that time, almost no one in the world could still read the ancient Egyptian language. Without the ability to read the inscriptions on its walls, the true history of the pyramids and their builders was lost. Roman writers had long guessed at their origins, but after the fall of the empire, myths and speculation took over entirely. A few centuries later, Egypt fell under Arab rule, and with it came new legends. Some believed the pyramids were pre-flood structures, built by a lost civilization to preserve knowledge before an ancient catastrophe. Others thought they were massive grain silos, treasure vaults, or even tombs of long-forgotten giants. For over 1,000 years, the pyramids stood in silence, admired, feared, and misunderstood. It was not until modern archaeology in the 19th century that scholars began to piece together their true story, finally revealing the lost world of the pharaohs and their builders. The final irony: Rome conquered Egypt, but never understood it. The Romans believed they were the masters of history. They chronicled their rise to power in glorious detail, crafting epic stories of conquest, heroism, and divine destiny. Their poets and historians, from Livy to Tacitus, recorded the triumphs of the Roman legions, the wisdom of their emperors, and the superiority of Roman civilization. To them, Rome was the pinnacle of human achievement, the center of the world, the eternal empire, the greatest force history had ever known. But when they stood before one of humanity's greatest architectural achievements, they were clueless. The pyramids, towering and ancient, mocked Rome's arrogance. These monuments had witnessed the rise and fall of entire civilizations long before Rome was even a collection of villages. They had stood while the pharaohs ruled, while Babylon flourished, while the Mycenaeans built their palaces, and they would continue standing long after Rome crumbled into dust. The pyramids had already stood for twice as long as Rome would ever exist. Yet, the Romans, conquerors of Egypt, rulers of the known world, never truly grasped their significance. They took Egypt's treasures, plundered its temples, and stole its obelisks, but they never unlocked its secrets. And today, We, armed with modern archaeology, satellite imaging, and hieroglyphic translations, know more about the Pyramids of Giza than the most powerful rulers of Rome ever did. The empire that sought to immortalize itself in history couldn't even comprehend the history that came before it. If you enjoyed this dive into the mysteries of ancient history, make sure to subscribe for more. There's so much more to uncover about the civilizations that shaped our world. And let me know in the comments, what ancient mystery do you want to see explored next?